Hello, everyone. My name is Douglas Fraser from DeWitt LLP in Milwaukee. I'm a member of the Wisconsin Board and an LFI chair for JNF Wisconsin. First, I hope you and your family are healthy and doing well in this challenging time. On behalf of the Jewish National Fund, Lawyers for Israel, I want to express our appreciation to each of you in our community for your continued support and commitment to the land and people of Israel. I've been a member of JNF for most of my life, and one of the things I really love about the organization is it's so easy to see where our efforts and our money are going. You visit Israel and you see the projects, you can't miss them. They're everywhere, they're easy to understand, and they're doing a lot of good for the Jewish people. I'm proud to share that the Lawyers Division is over 650 members strong, and since October has raised nearly $3.62 million, which was already more than our entire campaign last year. So JNF lawyers, we're coming through. It's been a long time since we've gathered in person. I'd like to invite everybody to Israel this October 10 through 14, that's 2021, for the Jewish National Fund USA Conference, USA National Conference. This is the first time it's being held in Israel, and it'll be fantastic. I've been to several conferences in the US, and each one has been a very worthwhile experience. Great people, great speakers, great exchange of ideas, a lot of energy. I'd recommend it to anybody. So details of the conference in Jerusalem will be found at jnf.org/NC. Now I'm going to hand this over to my wife, Karen Shapiro, to introduce today's guest speaker. Karen?
Great. Thank you, Douglas. So I'm Karen Shapiro. I'm an environmental lawyer in Milwaukee. I serve on the board of directors of JNF Wisconsin, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Friends of the Arava Institute, a partner organization. March is Women's History Month, and we just celebrated International Women's Day last week. I'd like to highlight one of the Jewish National Fund's most important groups, and that's Women for Israel. This dynamic group of female philanthropists share a passion for building a prosperous future for the land and people of Israel, and they act on that passion. They spearheaded JNF USA's Blueprint Negev, and about 25 years ago had a vision that led to the creation of a town called Zukim in southern Israel, which is home to about 400 people now. I'm proud to be a part of Women for Israel as a member of the High Society, and I have the pleasure today to welcome today's speaker, who among her many accomplishments pioneered the Institute for Women's Leadership at Marquette University. Andrea Schneider joined the faculty of Marquette Law School in 1996. She teaches alternative dispute resolution, negotiations, ethics, and international conflict resolution. In addition to be the inaugural director of the Women's Institute for Leadership at Marquette University, Andrea also serves as the director of the nationally ranked Alternative Dispute Resolution Program at Marquette University Law School. In 2009, Professor Schneider was awarded the Women of the Year Award given by the Wisconsin Law Journal and the Association for Women's Lawyers. In 2016, she gave her first TEDx talk entitled Women Don't Negotiate and Other Similar Nonsense. She was named the 2017 recipient of the ABA Section of Dispute Resolution Award for her outstanding scholarly work. Andrea gives negotiation trainings around the world to corporations, law firms, court systems, and most recently has focused on faculty in the STEM and medical fields, for which she has now received federal grants for software development and training. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming today's keynote speaker, Andrea Schneider. Andrea, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Karen. I love those kinds of intros where, you know, it's one of those that your mom would be delighted. And so I very much appreciate your kind words. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's an honor to talk to JNF lawyers, and it's a delight to talk about traveling to Israel. I know we are all looking forward to the ability to do that again sometime really soon. So I very much appreciate this. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about travel to Israel, as we know, and what we've learned on international conflict resolution. And I figured I would organize our time today with about 5 minutes on the background of the trips and how these were developed, about 7, 8 minutes or so on the details of the trip, and then our remaining time on lessons for me, lessons for students, what's happened in the community, and then to leave time for questions. So I know it's not a lot of time, and I'll be skating over some details, and I'll look forward to your questions at the end if there's anything that I can help illuminate or explain. So with that, we know that for many of us, when we think about international conflict, we think about Israel. And as Karen so graciously outlined in my introduction, I've been thinking about negotiation, dispute resolution, conflict theory for my entire career. And I've got to say early on, I didn't focus on Israel at all. I visited as a kid, as a law student, but really my early career was, you know, just not focusing on Israel. There were plenty of people writing about Israel. And yet what I'd seen over the course of my early career is that every textbook, everybody who teaches about dispute resolution, even without any international experience or knowledge, would at least refer to Camp David, that this was the quintessential example of international conflict in action, and what actually works. And so whether it was in popular books, whether it was in textbooks, people discussed what happened at Camp David, and then would of course circle back to kind of Camp David and then current events wherever that was falling. So that was kind of the background in terms of thinking about Israel. Then at the same time, I knew that experiential learning was something that was really valuable. I was very lucky in college that I twice was able to travel overseas to study. I was a poli-sci international diplomacy major, and going overseas and talking to leaders really gave me insight into the different conflicts. I was in Greece and Turkey, and then I was in Europe on conventional defense. And in both instances, talking to the people on the ground was incredibly eye-opening. It was the best experience that I'd had in college. And I thought that finally my kids were a little older, I could leave, that I really wanted to provide this experience to my law students. And so my first trip was actually to Europe. That was my expertise. As I said, I hadn't done Middle East. I'd done all sorts of work in Europe. And so we, you know, kind of traveled around and went to Paris and The Hague and so on and so forth. And the very classic, seeing the international courts in action, things like that. And Europe was terrific. I loved it. And yet there was still something kind of in the back of my mind going, you know, at the end of the day, most people will make their way to Paris. It's not all that compelling. In the meantime, I should also say I've taken students now. I took students to Cuba the moment that it opened, and then it closed. So that was a one-off trip. And last spring, did take students to Northern Ireland. So yes, you could definitely say that I am a conflict junkie, as it were. That's where I travel for fun and with my students. But at the same time, as I had realized, Israel was something different and something special. And what I understood was that law students, particularly I teach at Marquette University, it's a Jesuit institution. Most of my students are not Jewish. Most of my students have never been to Israel. Most of them know very little about the Middle East, if at all. And so they were not going to Israel, right? That was not even on a bucket list. There was no way that they were going to get there unless I held their hand, right? Unless it was a trip that said, come with me, rather than a you should go. And so about 12 years ago, designed a class that would start to focus on Israel, where I could take them there, and that we could all learn about Israel together. The design of the class is that there's a spring seminar, and then we would go over spring break. So they would have about 8 weeks of class before we would actually get on the ground. And as I say, it's not just an expensive boondoggle. This was not a, we're just going to go for 1 week over spring break or even 2 weeks over the summer without any learning. My goal was that people would land on the ground with at least some exposure to Israeli history, Israeli society, immigration patterns, some history of the conflict. And yet, let me say from the outset, of course, that's ridiculous, right? Because there are 8 weeks. I would start with a class on kind of general conflict resolution theory and diplomacy and so on and so forth. But, you know, my favorite class is the one class session, which was an hour, 40 minutes, basically from Jesus to 1967. That's insane, right? That's completely insane. People spend semesters studying that plus more, and to try to get anybody up to speed on any of this is folly. And I say that to the students. We are trying to do something as fast as possible. I did find a great book that teaches the whole thing with maps so that they're visuals. That's really wonderful, but still, right? It's trying to get them at least some semblance, some knowledge of the country and the history, recognizing that that's not nearly enough. Each student, just to finish the class component, writes a research paper when they return. And so that is a traditional law seminar like all of you experienced. And so you get back and you write a paper, and their research papers over the years have had a huge array of topics on, you know, immigration and sports and peace building and foreign policy, and really whatever they want to dive into, whatever really interests them in terms of a paper. So then we land. And the structure of the trip is that there are 3 legs of this stool. There's tourism, there's law, and there's conflict resolution. So as you can see, and the rest of this will have lots of pictures from the trip, from the various trips over the years. I've now taken 5 trips with about 180 students total, maybe up to 200 at this point. So a lot of alumni out there in the world. This is one of the shots from the Dead Sea. This is me up at the Golan Heights with one of my colleagues. I always travel with 2 or 3 other faculty colleagues from Marquette who they themselves have never been to Israel. So that is also an additional exposure. And this other picture is with one of the lawyers for the Ethiopian community. So we're really trying to show students a variety. They're having fun, they're learning about law and lawyers and different aspects of society. And then we try to see what's going on in the ground in terms of conflict resolution as well. So I'll tell you a little bit about each piece of this. The tourism, of course, is the fun part. We could all imagine that. The course of the trip is that we always start in Jerusalem. We will then head up north to the Galilee. We'll stay at a kibbutz at least one night because that in and of itself is a great experience for the students. And again, as most of them are not Jewish, being up in that region is really important to them. And we do some Christian sightseeing up there. We'll then cut across to Haifa and usually spend a night in Haifa. The University of Haifa Law School has some really amazing programs in conflict resolution, so that's another reason to do that. And we end in Tel Aviv, always getting to Tel Aviv, if not Wednesday, definitely by Thursday night, so that they can go out, and Friday afternoon is at the Tel Aviv beach, because there is no better way to lock in love of Israel than to make sure everybody has their Friday afternoon off on the Tel Aviv beach before we usually fly out Friday night or first thing Saturday morning. And so you can see it's kind of a fun mix of the tourism and making sure that everybody is getting some flavor of that. And as I mentioned, really also the religious sites as well, which are very compelling for many of them. The second leg of this is obviously as a law class. We make sure that we are visiting law schools, and it's a mix every time depending on schedules and who's available and so on and so forth. I try to connect them with at least one set of law students where we'll either do some sort of exercise or meet and greet or something like that. So they'll get to meet law students, see different law schools. Justice Aaron Barak, and you see the picture with he and his wife Elika. We're old friends, and so that is a a very nice visit every time for the students, and both Judge Barak herself as a former labor lawyer, labor judge, and then Justice Barak speak to the students, and that is a perennial highlight. We'll always go see the Supreme Court. That building's incredible, as you know, the Knesset. There'll be usually some lawyer from the Foreign Ministry or the IDF or something like that to tie in the military. And then again, whatever law faculty, depending on schedules and who's around and who's on sabbatical, to make sure that they're meeting and greeting with some of my colleagues, either in international law, in conflict resolution, negotiation, or something like that. So that is a second leg of the stool. And then the third leg is conflict resolution, and really looking at the peace building organizations on the ground for students to understand what is going on. And in this, it's, there are a couple things that are remarkable to the students. One is often that Israel doesn't have a constitution, and to understand how there's constitutional law without a constitution per se is often the eye-opening piece of the legal education. The conflict resolution, for most of these students, the vast majority, what they know of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is what's on the front page of the New York Times, and nothing more than that. So there's very little understanding of all of the different types of peace organizations, what's happening on the ground, the details of the security barrier, really any of those things. And so we really try to tour around in different areas to understand what's happening. We always go up to Givat Haviva, which is a kibbutz right on the border of the West Bank, sort of near Haifa, and up there, and take a tour. You see in the bottom right, a picture of this town, Barta'a, an Arab village that was divided in 1967 and now redivided with the security barrier differently, and for students to understand that. We'll take a tour. The top picture is my students playing in a Budo for Peace. This is Budo like judo in one of the organizations that brings Arab and Jewish kids together in northern Israel in martial art training. And so that was just hilarious to get my students to do that as well. Our last trip, we hadn't started off going to the West Bank in the early 2010s, but by our last trip in 2019, things were quiet enough. And we did go to Ramallah and Rawabi, which was the first time that I'd ever been there. And this is a picture with Sab Erekat we were able to meet. And so the students really had a very interesting perspective of what was going on in the West Bank as well. All right, so let me turn to lessons and kind of thoughts. And again, I'm happy to answer more questions about what we were seeing on the ground. And I'll say the first thing is the lessons for me and why we keep on doing this. I'll say, there are times where I'm like, I can't believe I'm going back to Israel again. This is crazy. I do have a sister there, so I have plenty of reason to go back and do go back all the time to see her. There's no reason I need to do this, except that I think it's just so wonderful. And to see Israel, as I'm sure many of you know, when you see Israel through somebody else's eyes and they've never been there before, and whether it is their delight on homemade shakshuka, or the markets at Machne Yehuda, or the nature as we're walking around, the geography of Israel, any of these things, it reminds you how much you like the country. And so, their delight becomes my delight. And so I'm always really grateful for that. The next thing I'll say is that over the years, I teach at a Jesuit institution. And so, I know things like when does Easter fall, but really experiencing both Christian and Muslim sites with my Christian and Muslim students is such a gift. It is a privilege to, again, it's neither of these are my religions. I don't have that understanding, but to see it through their eyes and to see their religious fervor. I've had students sobbing at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, at the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth. We've been able, not each time, but again, sometimes, to go to the Dome of the Rock. And we were actually up on the Temple Mount at our last trip. That hasn't been the case. Typically, I would send the student to go visit the Dome of the Rock and then hear about their visits afterwards. But to really experience seeing the religion and their excitement has been just wonderful and eye-opening, and I've learned a lot. And so I appreciate that as well, because I, like many of us, go to Israel with my Jewish lens and my perspective. And so I appreciate the ability to learn from them. And the last thing that I'll say in terms of particular insights is in some ways becoming more willing to own my bias. I think early on when I would teach about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and for law professors, we are trained, we should be neutral. When we're teaching ethics, we can say we're in favor of ethics, but we're not supposed to be judgy. When we're teaching con law or, pick your subject, the idea is that as lawyers, we're supposed to be neutral. As law professors, we're even more trained to be neutral. And so I used to come into this subject with the idea of, I'm going to try and be as neutral as possible. And over the years, I've realized, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not neutral. I am in favor of peace. I am in favor of rockets not landing on my sister. And I don't hide that anymore. And I make sure that they, rather than trying to shield that, to really talk about with them openly about what that means when you're learning something and you have a perspective and you're not neutral, and yet you really want to and need to understand all of their perspectives. Because I think that actually is the lawyering skill. So you'll see the top picture here is a picture of the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth. On the right, we are enjoying a winery, of course, but on the left is a picture of my sister talking to my students. She's a professor at Hebrew U, teaching at their global program about nonprofits. So she's met us up north where she lives to talk about her nonprofit work, and that is me holding my niece. I'm not neutral. So that is, I think, a really interesting lesson it has been for me, and then to talk about it with the students. In terms of their lessons, they are assigned, by the way, to journal every day, and we block time on the buses or in the hotel for them to be able to write. They are assigned blog posts. So when we get back from Israel, we basically blog. I'll give them a couple days, but we'll blog basically every day for 2 weeks after about everything that we saw. And so the students are expected to contribute to that. And of course, they're posting on social media nonstop while they're there. So there's opportunities for reflection all the way through. And look, for some of them, it's the history. They've had no idea. You'll see the picture on the bottom right. You'll recognize this from Yad Vashem. Again, most of them have never been to Israel. They have some Holocaust knowledge. It's not Yad Vashem, right? And so really anchoring them in the Israeli Jewish narrative is something very new for them. For some, it's the religion and being more exposed to Judaism, to Islam. Again, the vast majority are some strain of Christianity. And so, going through the Arab market, going to the wall, walking through the Jewish quarter, all sorts of information for them. And for some, it's really just understanding the dynamics of the country, the diversity of the country. The top pictures from a Druze village. We always make sure to provide a visit to the Druze village for the food, if not for more education. And you'll see that Tzipi Livni on the bottom left, and really just getting a better sense of the political history, the geography. Understanding the Golan Heights is best done from the Golan Heights, right? And they'll just bring that back. The results over the years have been everything from really, I'll start with the incredible student bonding. These are trips that they regularly come back and say it changes their lives. These are friends. They get married to each other, which is a lot of fun. Jobs, one set of students from Israel will then hire the next set of students in the market. So there's all of those kind of personal benefits that happen, as we all know, when you do these missions, as it were. The other thing I think is really what they take with their own legal skills and to learn that the world is not black and white. It's much easier to see this when it's not your conflict, right? When it's not your client, or even in race relations, when it's not either white students dealing with the African-American experience here or vice versa. They go to Israel. For most of them, it's not their conflict, and it's much easier to understand, oh, gray, huh? And then bring it home back here. And many of them have talked about that over the years and lessons and things that they've learned in Israel and have brought back to their own practice. I think the community impact has also been something that has been really appreciated here in Milwaukee in particular. Each of these students have become advocates for Israel. BDS was defeated here at Marquette in 2016. At least 2 of my students have gone on to be, have worked in legislative offices for our senators and House of Representatives in Wisconsin. And having a legislative assistant who's been to Israel is really helpful over the years. As I think the broader kind of ripple effect, we talk about those social media posts of the network of their family and friends. Students have now gone back on their own and brought their families. As I mentioned, we blog on the Marquette faculty blog and Indisputably, which is the dispute resolution law prof blog. So that goes out to hundreds each time we do this. And to the point where there were so many law professors around the country that were reading the blog posts that they too wanted to go to Israel. And so in December 2017, I organized a trip for dispute resolution professors from across the country to be able to go to Israel and experience this. And although the pandemic has put a hold on that, there are now 2 other law professors from Arizona and from Texas who are planning their own trips to lead students to Israel. So that's really, again, that hope that, again, more people to Israel, the broader impact will have. My goals, I'd love to have more trips for professors in general. And these are my 2 college roommates, which after taking my law students for a decade to Israel, I realized I'd never actually gone with my best friends, my best non-Jewish friends. And I think, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd love there to be missions. I've been on women's missions and lawyer missions. It should actually be take your best non-Jewish friend, because you'll see Israel in their eyes and they'll see Israel in your eyes. And that's an incredible opportunity. So that would be my future goal for all of us here. And with that, I will turn it back to everybody, and I am looking forward to answering any questions. And let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you, thank you, Andrea, for your insightful presentation. My name is Robert Ganz. I'm the National Chair of Lawyers for Israel. I'm a commercial litigator with a practice in Albany, New York. I want to have you for a moment. All the questions are being queued up and Kim Levy will present them in a moment, but I do want to take a moment, if we can, to focus on why we're drawn together today. As members of Lawyers for Israel, we have much to be proud of and also much to accomplish. And therefore, it's an honor for me to lead this extraordinary group of professionals. Each of you has been generous in your support of the Jewish National Fund. And as you heard earlier, we've already exceeded last year's campaign. But there's more to be done. And therefore, I urge each and every one of you, if you've not already made your 2021 campaign commitment, to make that commitment and to fulfill it. I also want to make you aware of a new initiative of Lawyers for Israel, and that's an online referral directory. And this is a way in which you can share your professional details with lawyers across the country who are like-minded, who love Israel and are working for its benefit. It's going to provide you with an ability to hyperlink to your biography, to your firm's biography, to set forth a specialty. It's user-friendly. It will be searchable by geographic area and by specialty. I know I've personally used it. I've provided referrals to attorneys in different parts of the country, and I have received referrals. It's well worth it. You'll get a link to the referral directory sign up after the program. I urge you to take the 5 minutes involved to fill out the form and submit it to us, and soon it will be available widely. So I think that's great, and I urge you to participate. The more in the referral directory, the more useful it will be for all lawyers. I also want to invite you to save the date for our next national program, August 25th. At that time, we'll have a program that will be entitled Twice Abused, the Struggle for Reparations for Hungarian Survivors of Auschwitz in the US Supreme Court. And our speaker will be Chuck Fax, who is one of the lead counsel on that case. It was argued in the Supreme Court just last month. And by the time of our program on August 25th, I'm sure we'll have a decision by the end of this Supreme Court term. I think it'll be fascinating. And so I urge you to register for that program. You'll get reminders of that as well. So please don't miss that next program. If you have questions or concerns about Lawyers for Israel, what we do, what we can do, please get in touch with me. And you can do that at the following email, lawyers@jnf.org. So please do that. And of course, if any of you want to become more involved in Lawyers for Israel, I'm happy to talk with you and find you an appropriate role to continue to grow this national network of lawyers who love and support Israel and want to work for its betterment through JNF. So now I want to turn it over to Kim Levy, who will set forth the questions to Professor Schneider. And I want to again add my thanks for everyone for taking time out of their busy day to attend. Kim?
Thank you, Rob. My name's Kim Levy. I'm the Executive Director for the Midwest, and I am so proud to have Andrea speak today from Milwaukee. She's a remarkable woman, and from the moment I watched her TEDx talk, I thought, this woman has got to address our JNF community. So thank you so much, Andrea. I also want to thank Doug Frazier and Karen Shapiro, who are LFI chairs and on my board of directors at JNF Wisconsin. And again, I'm so proud to have representation from the community as well as those from the Milwaukee Jewish community that are on the call today to support Andrea. Thank you, Andrea. We had a variety of questions in the chat, and I kind of would divide them up between questions that related to the trip and the students, and then maybe just some general overall questions about Israel and the legal system. So in order to be efficient with our time and get everyone back to their billable hours after that, let's maybe break them up that way and talk a little bit about the students. Combining a few questions, people were curious, is there a bias sometimes for these students before the trip, and how has it changed after the trip? And then another question I just loved was, what was one of the most, the best reaction or typical reaction that you have seen as an educator and a leader of this trip from the students? So maybe if you kind of want to talk to maybe what their preconceived notions were going in and how you saw them evolve during the trip, and we can take that as one question.
Sure. So the bias question is a good one, and I will survey the students at the beginning of the course. Some years we've surveyed them afterwards as well, because I've received funding over the years. I now have local funders that have stepped in, but when I had national funding twice, you know, they also wanted to see results. And so, right, let's pull them before and after. Most students have, it's not a strong anti-Israel bias, because look, they've already decided that they're devoting their time to a class and that they're going to Israel for spring break. So if there was a really strong, I'm never going to step in Israel bias, I don't think, you know, I think they would select out. But I've had students, you know, particularly, I think it's more apparent for my Muslim students, which I've had multiple times, where you know, the one sibling married a Palestinian. My Muslim students have been mostly Moroccan. My Moroccan student felt at home when she came to Israel. That was amazing. She's like, oh, these are my people. There was so much Moroccan experience in Israel that she felt really at home. But I had a student 2 years ago, Lebanese descent originally, and we worked hard actually to keep he was off of social media. He didn't want anyone to know in his family that he was there. In his extended family, he thought that there could be danger. And in fact, when he went to Lebanon afterwards, was detained because there was still one sticker on one of his bags, on one of his luggage, that the Lebanese authorities recognized when it was an Israeli security sticker. And he thought he had cleaned everything out. So they definitely come with, I think, a suspicion. And recent more, they have been early on, I think, in the Netanyahu administrations, there was less anti-Netanyahu. More recently, and again, reflecting what's in the newspaper, there's more of that bias. I think they come back, we hope, with a fuller understanding that there is, and I've seen this, that again, that gray. One of my favorite blog posts years ago was titled, you know, I hate the security barrier. You know, I hate the fence, I love the fence, right? To understand that the security barrier has caused all sorts of hardship for the population in the West Bank, and it has worked. So what do you do with those truths of the lines are terrible, the what it has done to families, to vineyards, to visits to the hospital, right? You name it, is awful, and it has worked in terms of providing more security and reducing bombings. So I think, well, they come back with a far more nuanced appreciation. And as I said, some of them do go back. I think the surprise one on, and Kim, correct me, was what the question is, what was the most surprising thing from one of the students? Right. Sorry, you're muted, but I'm judging from the nod that is correct.
What reaction elicited, right? What reaction from a student were you most surprised about?
Gosh, I don't even know anymore. I mean, I think when they love it, I think what is continually surprising to them is how modern they see the country. And so, you know, there's a reason I end at Tel Aviv. I mean, it's Manhattan on a beach. And so, you know, the disconnect of what they see, and you know, when we go to Jerusalem and the religiosity in some ways of Jerusalem with Tel Aviv continues to kind of shock them. And so it's always a good reminder to me of like, oh, right, like they're surprised and I am jaded at this point by that. And I need to, it's always a good reminder to me not to be jaded. The last time we were there, it was one of the times where there were rockets fired at Tel Aviv, and I'm totally jaded. I'm like, oh, you're fine. Just come back to the hotel. We'll stay here, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, they're a little, as I understand, but anyway.
As a follow-up to that, I like this question, what that Gary put in the chat. What 3 or 4 conflict resolution techniques have you discovered are used in Israel that are not regularly used or employed in the US?
So I think some of the things that we've talked about, actually trying to even implement in Milwaukee, in other areas, Israel is, there's a lot of things in terms of cross-community work. I remember learning years ago about, and I'm blanking on the name, but it was basically Weight Watchers across Palestinian and Jewish lines. And so there was one in Jerusalem and one in Akko, and they would get together and compare recipes, and they're, and how to lose weight, of like, you should see my Shabbat dinners. You should see what I have to do for Ramadan, of like, how do I lose weight while feeding? And really thinking about sometimes the simplest of things that can build community. We have always met with the Parents Circle, which is relatives of people that have died on all sides of the conflict, and having those really restorative justice circles. And so we have some use of restorative justice here in the United States, particularly in victim offender mediation. But we haven't really used it between communities that are clashing, whether it is African American and white communities, whether it's other kinds of kind of community work. Israel has done a really nice job in that way. And so I think thinking about how we can translate that is an interesting thing. And the students come back and they write about it and talk about it, and hopefully bring it into their work.
Good. Susan Halpern asks, how do you use Camp David in your class on negotiations?
So Camp David is I should say, the traditional use of Camp David is the classic. We use it for positions versus interests. That if you looked at the positions of Egypt and Israel, Egypt was sovereignty is non-negotiable, and Israel is security is non-negotiable. And a mediator, Jimmy Carter or anybody else who would have stopped at the negotiation over values, would have given up, right? Who's going to negotiate security? Who's going to negotiate sovereignty? You can't do that. But what they were able to do at Camp David was to dig underneath those positions, and to say sovereignty. Sovereignty means a flag, as in the flag, the Egyptian flag has to fly over the Sinai. But we actually don't care where the tanks are stationed, right? So we'll fly a flag, but we will have wide swaths of demilitarized zones, and you can draw where those lines are for where the tanks are going to be. And so, what does security mean? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's an Egyptian flag over the Sinai, as long as they were providing security guarantees. And so in traditional dispute resolution theory, it's often used as what seems like intractable positions, because you're negotiating crucial values to the negotiation over interests once you get into the details.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question was asked about if you expect, or how do you feel the Abraham Accords will have an impact on your class and your students, and weaving that into it?
I mean, I think it's fascinating. I am looking forward. I haven't had class since on this topic since the Abraham Accords were signed. And, I think some of it is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And some of it is understanding common interests. And some of it is the evolution of interests over time, right? That interests are not immutable, that countries and their needs and strategic needs change over time. And I have always used the example of, if you were German or French if you look at German and French history, they were at war in 1870, 1914, 1940, right? Like over and over and over, and now they are tied at the hip economically, completely open borders. One can't imagine, right? It would be unbelievable to a French person in 1945 that you were going to be best buddies, as it were. And I think this is just another, I hope, historic shift in recognizing that interests and needs change.
Good. Another question, kind of more politically headed, is what's your view on the Palestinian Authority recent efforts to file charges against Israel with the International Criminal Court?
Well, interesting, to say the least. I think, if you look at the leadership, and again, books, novels, movies have been written about the strengths and weaknesses of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian leadership. I think trying to file a case on the one hand is a show to their domestic, to their constituency, that they are still in power, that they are still, fighting the man, taking a case against Israel. And they did this, they took the Wall case to the International Court of Justice. They've tried to have international law, kind of say, bad Israel. It hasn't worked to really change Israeli behavior. And so I don't think it's a short-term, it's not to help negotiations with Israel. I really think it is a way of staying in power domestically and demonstrating your relevance, because again, note the timing. It's the Abrahamic Accords. There's movement away from focusing on the Israeli-Palestinian issue by the Arab states. So I think this is, I think they're doing it for that reason. It's obviously not to improve relations with Israel.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. I want to thank you. You have taken a very simple concept of taking students to Israel and providing that experience for them, and made an impact on your own community as you've brought it back to the Milwaukee community, on all of our, Israel, and on coexistence for teaching students how negotiations can work in their favor. Thank you so, so much. In the bottom of the chat box, we just posted your TEDx talk. If anyone wants to watch that on women in negotiations, I know that might be interesting. But thank you again for your time, and thank you all of you for participating today. Mark that date also for August 25th. Chuck Fax will be also another great speaker you won't want to miss. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.